Dynadoc. Hello, friends. I'm Zach, and I'm going to take you on a journey through possibly one of the hardest problems in computer science, which is how do you document code? That's it. How do you document code? Apparently this is difficult because some of the best programmers I've ever met are terrible at it. And this has nothing to do with particular languages. It's a problem everywhere. I'm a Clojure programmer. It's certainly a problem in our world, but it's a problem everywhere. And I made a tool I think will solve it. And before I get into it, I'm going to show you what the tools look like today. So if you want to make documentation today, you normally use some kind of documentation generator. So here's documentation for a game library called libgdx, okay? And you can see it's nice. It's got every class, it's got every package in here. You can just sift through it and find every method you want, right? It's very useful. In Clojure, we have something similar. It's a tool called Codocs. And here's documentation for Ring that it produced. And same thing, you know, you find every function inside of this library, every doc string. All right, it's nice, but I want something more. You know, with a language like Clojure, Clojure is a Lisp. And the thing about Lisps is they want to be evaled, okay? They want you to play with them in a REPL. They want you to experiment, try stuff out, fail, try something else. And, you know, reading documentation is nice, but most of what you learn is in a REPL. So how do we combine the two together? Well, I figured out a possible way to do that. So I made a tool called Dynadoc. And Dynadoc is a tool you run in any Clojure project, and this is what you see. First of all, it finds every namespace in your project, including third-party libraries. So it'll probably be a long list. And it's searchable, okay? So you can just search, you know, boom, search for concat. Okay, there's concat. And you know, you can, if there's a doc string, it'll show you that. It'll show you the source code. So that's not that interesting because every documentation generator does that. The unique part is that it actually lets you define interactive examples. So I wrote an interactive example for conj. This is a common function in Clojure, and it's confusing to beginners because the way conj works, it adds something to a collection, but where it puts it depends on what data structure you're adding it to. If you're conjing something to a vector, it'll put it at the end. But if you're conjing something to a list, it'll put it at the beginning. Now, why is that? Well, it has to do with the efficiency of the data structure and I have no fucking clue why, honestly, but that's something you have to learn as a Clojure programmer. So how are you going to learn it? Well, most people learn it just through trial and error. So I feel like a interactive example will teach you that very quickly. So look at this. So we've got an example here. Add a name to a vector, and it says conj Alice Bob, and then it says Charlie. So it's trying to add Charlie to this vector. Well, you can see here that Charlie was added to the end. And I can even mess with it. You know, I'll change Charlie to David just to show you it's actually real time. Okay, let's add another name to it. Let's add George. Or, you know what, Gerard. Let's do that. You can see Gerard was added right at the end there. So now what about a list? So we've got conj 2, 3, and then we're trying to add a 1 to it. Well, you can see here that the 1 was added to the beginning. What happens when I add another number to it, like 5? Well, that's what happens, you know? So this kind of stuff, like, yes, you can read some dry docstring or book and it'll tell you this, but why not just play with it and figure it out on your own? That's what I think, at least. So that's why I think interactive docs will be a game changer for Clojure. But I'm not done. Because you know, interactive stuff is nice, but well, first of all, let me show you how to actually do it. So here's another function here called getExtension, and it basically does what you probably think. So you give it a string, you give it some file name, and it gives you the extension back. But there's no clear indicator of exactly how it behaves. So what do? In Clojure, you fire up a REPL and you play with it. Well, why don't we just add an interactive example right there? So let's go to the source code. Here's the source code for getExtension. And to define an example, you say def example getExtension. Okay? And then in the body of this macro, you say, you just give the actual example. So getExtension, and then let's just give it a file name, myfile.txt. Okay? So in this particular case, I actually do have to restart it, but that's just because I didn't wire it up to do reloading. But it should only take a few seconds here. But what's going to happen when it's actually ready is it's going to load up what we just wrote, and it's going to inject it into that page and provide it as a interactive example. So let me refresh here, and there you go. So the thing we just typed is now inside of this page. You can see get example myfile.txt, and watch this. It's actually editable. So change that to CSV. You can see the return value just updated. exe, boom. What happens if there's no extension at all? Well, that's what happens. It just provides the whole file name. These little intricacies you might be able to figure out if you read the source code, but it's nicer if you can just play with it. So that's why I think it's a big deal for Clojure. But that's only the beginning of it. All right. So the cool thing, all right, the really cool thing is Clojure script. So Dynadoc supports Clojure script as well. And the reason why it's really cool is, you know, with Clojure, it's, you know, you mostly just want to see the return value. But with Clojure script, oftentimes functions are not just some pure thing that returns something. Oftentimes they modify the DOM. They do something visual. They display a button. They display a menu, whatever. And so if you want to make an interactive example of that, you need something visual, right? Well, Dynadoc actually supports that. So, for example, this is a reagent component called clicks, which shows a button, and every time you click it, it increments the number and shows you how many times you click. So obviously it's a toy, but it's just meant to show how this works. So what if I want to actually show a real visual example of this component inside of this page? Well, let's go to the source code. So here's where it's defined. And what I'm going to do is, once again, I'm going to do def example clicks. But here's where things get a little bit different. So what I'm going to do, I need Dynadoc to give me a DOM element that I can put things inside of. And the way you do that is you can provide a little options map to Dynadoc, and you can say with card, and then just give it a name. So I'll call it card. So this is going to be a DOM element, which will be injected in that page, and I can put whatever I want in it, okay? Anything I want, Dynadoc will let me do it. And what I want to do is actually mount that particular component and say, you know, display it inside of that rectangle. So in reagent, it's just reagent.core / I need to look this up, render component, and then it says, so give me the component. So I'll just say clicks, and then I'll just write hi because I don't know what to put there. And then the second argument is the DOM element, which is card. Okay, well, look at that. I didn't even need to refresh anything because Dynadoc automatically found what I was typing and it injected it into the page. So you see here is the live example that I just wrote, and now I can tap hi and you can see it keeps incrementing. So that's how easy it is to make a visual example in Dynadoc. Now for reagent, in order to make this really interactive, you can see here this is the thing that you can edit. So if I want this to really be interactive, I want it to unmount first and then mount it again, so that every time I change the example, it will actually update this little rectangle here. So inside of here, I'm just going to say reagent.core / unmount component at node card, and then go back here. Let's do a little refresh. I'm also going to put nil. Okay, so once again, I can hit hi and it clicks and whatnot. But this part is kind of ugly, okay? You see how the actual editable example has all of this setup code? All I really want to show is this part right here, okay? Everything else here is like setup code that I don't really want to be displayed. Well, Dynadoc actually lets you only focus on one little chunk of code and nothing else. So the way you do that is you add a little thing here called with focus, and then just give it a name. I'm calling it focus. Actually, it's a binding form, so it has to be a vector. And then the second thing inside of the vector is the actual thing you want to display. So in this case, it's going to be clicks and then hi. And then inside of here, where we had the little clicks hi, I'm going to write focus. Okay, so this has to correspond with this right here. And I'm going to go back to here and look at that. Magically, it's only showing the actual vector containing the component. And you can see I can still tap on the button there And right here, I can edit the button text to say hello. Look at that. It automatically updated the button to show you hello. I'll put a bunch of parentheses. Okay, so I can create interactive examples this way, and I can keep them clean without any of that setup code by using this with focus thing. So with card and with focus are sort of both things that provide nicer examples, especially for Clojure script. So that's clicks. That's one thing. Another thing that can be really difficult for Clojure script especially is asynchronous examples, all right? And this can be a real pain because, especially in the browser, there are a lot of functions that don't return a result immediately. They have a callback function, and then they give you the result later. Now, why is that a problem? Well, let me show you an example. So I got a little function here called getLibVersion, and it's really simple. All it does is it says, give me the name of a Clojure library, and I'll give you the latest version of it, okay? But it's asynchronous, okay? It doesn't just give you the result immediately. It takes a callback, and it says, I'll give you the result later. Why? Well, because everything in the browser that does AJAX is asynchronous. It can't return a result immediately. So let me tell you why this is a problem for Dynadoc, okay? Let's go down here and give a let's give a little def example. Def example getLib version. Okay, so if we just say getLib version, and then let's just do, I'll just find the version of Dynadoc itself. Okay, and then for the callback, I'll just say console.log. So technically we have the example here, but notice the return value is just this random object bullshit. Not useful to us at all. Now, it actually ran correctly, and you can see that if you look into the JavaScript console, you see how it says 1.4.5 right there? It actually console logged the version number correctly. But we want it to display right here. But it didn't because getLibVersion did not return that number immediately. It returned it only in the callback. Well, turns out we actually can do this in Dynadoc. There's an option called with callback, and then I'll just give it the name callback. And then instead of console log, I'm going to write callback. And look at that. I mean, that's about as close to magic as you can get, guys. I mean, for real. It's showing 145 right there, even though it's an asynchronous function. How did that work? Well, this callback thing right here is like a special function that Dynadoc gives you. And so if you have an asynchronous function and it gets a value later, you just give it this callback here, and it will wait. It will like park and wait for it to finish, and then whatever it gets, it will display right here. So I don't know if I Englished that correctly, but I mean, you can figure it out. So that's asynchronous examples. And by the way, yes, this works with Clojure too. It's not just Clojure script. In fact, if I go back right here, there is a getLib version that I wrote in Clojure, not Clojure script. So you can see right here, this is the source code for it, and it does the exact same thing as the Clojure script version. It takes the name of the library and then a callback. And just to prove to you that it works, I'll change this to ring, and it says 163, you know? How about play CLJS, and it shows you 110. So it's actually querying Clojures and returning the version number. So asynchronous examples work in Clojure and Clojure script, and that is pretty fucking dope. And if you're not impressed, then something is wrong with you. So that's asynchronous examples. The only other thing I want to show you, since I'm still here, is since we mentioned PlayCLJS. PlayCLJS is my Clojure script game library. And this was one of the reasons I created Dynadoc. I wanted really interactive docs for my game library. Well, as you can see, that's what we got. So all of this was generated by Dynadoc, and it's using just those things that I mentioned. Okay, so the card there is created using with card. I'm hiding all of the setup code using with focus, and because this is asynchronous, I'm using with callback so that it will actually display the asynchronous stuff. So all of those three things that I mentioned before, I'm actually using in here, and you can see it provides really nice documentation, and it's totally editable. I can edit right here. So this is an example of animation. Well, let's change the duration from 200 to 100 milliseconds. You can see his feet are going faster. Let's change it to 50. Look at that. You know, let's move him from 10 to 100 pixels to the right. You know, you can just play with it like that. There you go. And you can do that for any of these, you know. The div one is kind of cool because it actually follows the mouse cursor. Isn't that cool? And I can actually edit, like, let's change this to green. Look at that. It just changed it automatically. That's just built-in, you know, functionality. So that's the basics of Dynadoc. The last thing I'll show is, so in Dynadoc, you may have noticed there's this export thing. When you tap that, it says, okay, do you want to just export this page, or do you want to export several? If you want to export a bunch of pages, like let's say you want to export any page, any namespace that has Clojure in it, well, there you go. You just type in Clojure, make sure that's what you want to export, and then you just click download zip file. And it will actually generate a static page, a static website with every namespace in this list. And you can put that online somewhere, you know? So, but the really legit thing, all right, is Clojure script, because with Clojure script, it can compile itself in a browser. So that means you can still get interactivity even in a static page that you put online. Okay, so this you know, game documentation here, this PlayCLJS documentation, you can see here, this is just a public GitHub pages link. So how am I able to edit this? How am I able to adjust all this code and see the result? Well, it's because Clojure script is compiling itself in the browser. It doesn't need any server. And that's something that Dynadoc supports if it's a Clojure script example. So you just click export and you get that. So, you know, I think, you know, for the most part, you might want to just run it locally. But if you want to, if you're making a library, you might want to put your documentation online somewhere. So that's how you do it. Anyway, I'm kind of tired of talking, and I'm pretty sure you're tired of listening. So I think I'm going to stop it there. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you didn't, as I always say, screw you.